You're listening to the Fierce Fatty Podcast, episode 103. What is a good fatty and a bad fatty anyway? Let's do it!
Perfect!
I'm Victoria Wellesby, TEDx speaker, best-selling author and fat activist. I have transformed my life from hating my body with desperately low self-esteem to being a courageous and confident fierce fatty who loves every inch of this jelly. Society teaches us living in a fat body is bad, but what if we spent less time, money and energy on the pursuit of thinness and instead focused on the things that actually matter, like if pineapple on pizza should be outlawed, or if the mullet was the greatest haircut of the 20th century. So, how do you stop negative beliefs about your fat body controlling your life? It's the Fierce Fatty Podcast. Let's begin. Hello and welcome, fatty. Nice to see you. Do you hear my voice crack then? I was like, let's do it. It's because I just did an hour Q&A. I feel like with your voice of talking, that you have to practice. As in, if you don't talk enough during the day, then you lose the ability to talk for long periods. Do you notice that? Maybe if you're working from home and you're not used to talking to your colleagues all day long, that when you just do a short meeting, you're like, why don't I have my voice? My voice is not as strong as it used to be when I would be talking to humans all day long. I'm like, how the heck do you talk to humans all day long and not lose your voice? Because after 1 hour, that's my limit. Then I need a rest. I've given myself an hour rest between my voice, but my voice is still like, hello. Hi, right? So anyway, whatever. You know what? I've got so many tabs open. Do you do this? You get something good, go in, and you don't want to close a tab because if you close a tab, you'll forget about it and you'll never go back to it. Well, I've got how many? Got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14 tabs. Oh, first tab, Whiteness at Work by Desiree Adaway. Course that I'm doing so good. Next tab, The Insane Story of Love Has Won Cult and Amy Carlson. Did you hear about this cult? You probably did. The Love Has Won, which was like the cult leader died and they kept her body, they mummified it, and it's fucking creepy as hell. Anyway. I watched don't hate me, I watched a Dr. Phil episode. Dr. Phil is a piece of shit, bad person. But I watched a pirated version on YouTube, okay, of an episode where he had this cult leader on. Now I'm watching another video about it. So Dr. Phil is trash, by the way. The next tab is the $5,000 quest for the perfect butt. The next tab is the history of diet culture. The next tab is 11 reasons your concern for fat people's health isn't helping anyone. The next tab is Marilyn Wan fighting fat fear at UCLA lecture. The next tab is police power and control wheel, the tactics of power and control in police perpetrated domestic violence. Oh, it goes on. It goes on. There's too many interesting things. I'm like, I don't want to ever exit out of this tab because I need to I don't know. You know, the fear that you're not gonna go back to it or something. The Whiteness at Work thing, that's okay. I would definitely go back to that. But I don't know why can't I just close the tab until I'm ready to watch the next video in the course? Because I normally do watching videos on a Friday. I mean, educating myself if I can. I do it on a Friday. So why can't I? Oh, fuck it. I'm gonna exit. Okay, I'm gonna try and exit some of these. Ugh. Anyway, today's episode. How are you? How's life? How you doing? You all right? I'm all right. Are you all right? All right? Good. So we're talking about good fatty, bad fatty. Have you ever heard about this concept? Probably if you've listened to the Fierce Fatty podcast. But I wrote a excellento Instagram post about it. And I was like, oh, I need to talk about this on the podcast. Do you know what? I will write, if I've got a post that's got words in it, I will do it, go away from it, go back and read it, because then I'm able to spot mistakes, and then read it out loud. I read this motherfucking thing out loud twice after reading it a few times. I was like, okay, no mistakes. I post it, and within a couple of hours, I look at it again. You know how you read your post being like, oh, I'm so smart. Oh, I'm so funny. Just to remind yourself what you said. And I read it, and I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, there's a fucking typo. So that it means the opposite thing of what I was saying in one of the slides. And I'm like, oh, why? How is this happening? It's so annoying to me. I find it so annoying. And the thing is, Instagram penalizes you if you edit the caption. It will show you that you've posted a new post or something. Anyway, whatever. And then if it's already got lots of comments and likes, you don't want to delete it to repost one with one word changed, because then Instagram's like, motherfucker, why are you deleting shit? And then you don't want to lose all the juicy comments, right? People having a conversation, then you're like, oh, I need to delete it because I got a word wrong. But then my part of my brain is like, oh, there's a word wrong. So anyway, I left a comment saying, oh, that word should say this, not that. Anyway, life is so hard. I'm being facetious, by the way. Life is, anyway, whatever. Life's not hard because I used the incorrect word one time. It's hard for other reasons. So I wanted to give you a few definitions before we get into this. What we're talking about is a good fatty, bad fatty archetype, the dichotomy, the tropes. I want to give you the quick definition of those three words in case you're not very familiar with them. So archetype means a very typical example of a certain person or thing. Trope is kind of similar. There's two definitions to trope. The one that we're concerned with is a common or overused theme or device, a cliche. So a cliche would be women are emotional, even though it's men that's emotional, from what we've seen, right? Women are too emotional, or fat people just eat donuts and sit at home and cry into their donuts because they're sad and fat. And the next word is dichotomy. A dichotomy is a division or contrast between two things that are or are represented as being opposed or entirely different. So let me read that again. A division or contrast between two things that are or are represented as being opposed or entirely different. So the contrast between, I don't know, night and day, but it wouldn't be used as that. It'd be used as what we're talking about today, between, good and bad, evil and what's the opposite of evil? Saintly? Godly? I don't know. I wonder how many times people are like shouting at their device that they're listening to, being like, that's the word you're trying to think of, Victoria, because sometimes I can't think of the word that I'm trying to say. I was listening to this podcast the other day about, it's called Duped. It's really good. If you're in the online business world, go and listen to it. It's from Maggie Patterson and her co-host, Dr. Michelle. I can't remember her last name. Anyway, they talk about the scams that are on the online business world and all of the unethical things that go on. And Dr. Michelle had lived in the UK for a while and was talking about a UK paper that has the tits. So there's I think they've stopped it now, but there's a couple of them, a paper that on page 3 would have naked women. So they'd have the breasts, not the vulvas, just breasts. Only the breasts. Just fucking, can you imagine the creepiest shit? What? In a newspaper. So Dr. Michelle was saying, oh yeah, the newspaper, I think it's called the Daily Mail is what she said. And I was like, it's the Sun. And she's like, yeah, I think it's the Daily Mail. And I was like, it's the Sun. And it's just like a little thing. I didn't want to like send them an email being like, excuse me, on episode this at they're saying you said it was the Daily Mail, but it's actually the Sun or the Star. It's not the Daily Mail, even though the Daily Mail is super trashy, but they don't have tits. But I wonder how many people do that with my podcast, being like, excuse me, but they don't want to send in a correction. You can send in corrections. That's cool. If I say, oh yeah, the American thing, whatever, or a Canadian thing, and I don't know what I'm talking about, or anything else where I don't know what I'm talking about, feel free to correct me. That's okay. Okay, so let's talk about this. I'm going to read out I actually turned it into a blog post because it was not that much text, but enough text that in on Instagram you put in, there's an option to put in alt text. Alt text is a text that will appear with the image for people who are visually impaired or blind, so they can tap on it and then there'll be text to say what the thing is. Anyway, so it was too much to put in alt text, so I just made it into a blog post. Anyway, so it's called the good fatty versus bad fatty false dichotomy. So what is that? This is from me, quoting myself, this is a harmful stereotyping of fat people as good or bad depending on a number of factors. Often, good fat people have increased privilege in society as they are seen as more palatable, bad fatties being the opposite. When someone doesn't fit into the good fatty archetypes, then that is given as a reason why they deserve abuse, lack of healthcare, bigotry, etc. Often, good fatty, bad fatty behaviours are unintentional or include unearned privileges. It doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong or right if you engage in one thing or another. Understanding how we perceive fat bodies can help us unlearn fat phobia and examine our biases. So, what is the quote-unquote good fatty stereotype? And all of these, like good fatty, bad fatty, they're all in quotation marks because they're stereotypes. They're just tropes. So a good fatty is more acceptable to society and oftentimes is a safer role to inhabit as a fat person. Frequently pitied, encouraged, and celebrated for the weight they've lost or the journey they're on to lose weight. Good fatties are seen as more productive members of society and excellent tools for capitalism. Seen as morally superior to bad fat people, can be looked down upon by others for still investing in diet culture and fat phobia. So the things that they might engage in is diets, is actively trying to lose weight, eats quote-unquote healthy food in public or eats small amounts of food, works out, can be an athlete and able-bodied, is fashion-forward and adheres to gender norms, the first to make jokes about their body size, the funny fat friend, is outwardly fat-phobic and dislikes fat bodies, especially their own, says, I'm fat but I'm healthy, has a, quote, reason for being fat that is seemingly, quote, not their fault. Hourglass-shaped. Okay, so moving on to the bad fatty stereotype. A bad fatty is way less acceptable to society and is often an unsafe role to inhabit as a fat person. Met with anger, disgust, disdain, and ridiculed by many, bad fatties are seen as less productive members of society and therefore less valuable. Judged as morally inferior, celebrated by others for being quote-unquote brave. Things that bad fatties do: eats food perceived as unhealthy, potentially in public and on social media. Wears clothes that have been deemed unflattering and show their body. Likes being fat and celebrates size diversity. Is not trying to lose weight. Doesn't discuss an acceptable reason, quote, for being fat. Disabled, unhealthy. Not adhering to gender norms of femininity or masculinity in appearance. Doesn't talk about their health status as a reason why they have more or less value. Not an hourglass shape. It's absolutely okay to be or to do or be any of the items on the lists intentionally or unintentionally. Neither make you better or worse. The good fatty, bad fatty dichotomy is made of stereotypes. No one fat person's experience is the same. Where it becomes problematic is when we use the, quote, good fatty trope as a reason to discriminate against people who don't adhere to it. In understanding the good fatty, bad fatty dichotomy, we also need to examine the factors that other systems of oppression play. Racism, transphobia, ageism, ableism, healthism, and sexism, to name a few. The reality is that all fat people deserve basic human respect, equal access and acceptance no matter what. Okay, so that's the thingamajig that I wrote. And I'm going to link to everything, show notes, fitnessvalley.com/103 or /podcast if you can't remember the number. So if you're struggling to get to a place of loving your body, it may be because you're scared, rightfully so, of being seen as a quote-unquote bad fatty, or letting go of your good fatty identity. It's so much easier, isn't it? Isn't it so much easier to try and make yourself as palatable to society, whatever that looks like, or perhaps it's not intentional, right? Because you could just be a healthy fat person and that's just who you are, right? You just happen to be a healthy fat person. And so that's like an unearned privilege. Or you could value health and so engage in health promoting activities while also understanding that health is mostly not in our control. And so you just happen to fall into that category of good fatty. And that's an easier place to exist versus if you were a fat person and you said, you know what, I'm just not interested in dressing in a certain way, like dressing to appear as feminine or masculine in the right way, or I'm just not interested in running a half marathon on a Sunday. I'm just not interested in only eating salad. I'm just interested in living my life, which is seen as bad because it's almost like society wants fat people to be apologetic, right? If you're fat, you better fucking apologize for it with the way that you behave. You better be sorry. You better be sorry. And to show us that you're sorry for your failing, you better be on a diet. You better be making jokes about how unattractive you are, so that we feel comfortable in your presence, that we know that you know your place. It's all about power, right? Because a fat person in society has less power than a straight-sized person. And how dare a fat person not be in their place? How dare a fat person not live with shame? And so it's great if we can just live our lives, but also it's very difficult because you're kind of shining a light on yourself. It's less safe. A lot of people, though, decide that they are not going to act in a certain way for the comfort of others. This is a quote I say all the time. What's more important, other people's comfort or your own mental well-being? And so some people, they say other people's comfort because that's also tied up with my mental well-being, because if people are judging me, I don't feel good. But some people will kind of reframe it and have the privilege to be able to do things which people see as bad fatty behavior. The reality is everyone's different, right? Most fat people don't fall neatly into good fatty or bad fatty. Like, like even someone like me who would be kind of, people would think as a bad fatty, I would fall into a lot of the kind of good fatty stereotypes, just because of, genetic luck, for example. So I would say I'm not exactly hourglass, but I would say I'm kind of getting close to having an hourglass figure, and so that would be seen as being a good fatty. I enjoy fashion, and so that would also be being seen as a good fatty. I guess that I'm healthy in regards to, like, I say that, but it's just, health. Like, what is health? We've talked about it on the podcast. What is health? Is like, health is a social construct, and I guess the health in regards to the stereotypical types of things that people will abuse fat people with, saying you're going to get type 2 diabetes, you're going to get heart disease, you're going to get la 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 la. So I would then fall into the good fatty stereotype. So so it doesn't mean, just to reiterate, it doesn't mean that you're good or bad. This is how society is viewing fat people, and it's problematic. It's not helpful. It's harmful to view fat people like this as good or bad, depending on their behavior, right? And to recognize that sometimes we engage in these things, in good fatty type behaviors, to be safe. Because it's so fucking hard to live in the world that hates fat people. Oh my gosh. So I love this piece from Stacey Bias, which is, it's so good. The 12 Good Fatty Archetypes. It's a comic blog post, and it's available as a zine. staceybias.net. And so this is Stacey did this in 2014. Oh my gosh. 2014, like it was just yesterday, and now it's how many years ago? Like whatever, 75 years ago. So the Good Fatty Examined is how it starts. So the post is 12 Good Fatty Archetypes by Stacey Bias, and I'm going to read some of this out. It's a like comic. I just fucking love that. I studied illustration, so anything visual like this, I'm just like, oh, I just fucking love it. Okay, so the Good Fatty Examined. Stacey says, there has been a lot of talk lately on fat acceptance blogs about what it means to be a, quote, good fatty. It seems to me that there are a lot of different kinds of good fatties, and each one serves its own kind of purpose. So what does it mean to be a good fatty? This part gets wordy, but stick with me. The general consensus is a good fatty is a fatty who is trying, or at least believes they should be trying, to no longer be a fatty. That's a reasonable definition of one kind of good fatty. But before we can understand what it means to be a good fatty, we first have to figure out what a bad fatty is and how they came to be seen as bad in the first place. Like most bad ideas, it starts with money and morality. So, capitalism requires productivity. Therefore, a productive body is seen to be one that produces and reproduces, fit, able, and, quote, desirable. So any given society is basically just a collection of people who agree with each other about certain things. Those beliefs are standardized, but constantly shifting, and those who conform to them are included, and those who don't are not. The basis for these beliefs is called morality, and there is a moral order to any society. In Western societies, because we're mainly capitalist and intent on increasing wealth, morality is most concerned with maintaining productivity. For that reason, there is a mandate for self-sacrifice and for caring for our bodies in a way that maintains their productive and reproductive potential. So basically, we are meant to be strong, able-bodied, heterosexual, and sexually desirable. Folks who don't conform to any or all of the above have stigmatized identities and are even denied rights. Stacey continues, segregation and aspiration. You can imagine society as a large circle with several smaller circles inside of it. At the core are the most privileged, with the most power, who benefit the most from maintaining societal inequalities. The further away you get from the core, the less power and privilege you have. So when I talk later about arguing for social legitimacy, what I am referring to is a fight to be seen as included in one of the many spheres of acceptability in any given society. For the most part, each good fatty archetype that exists is basically an argument for justification for inclusion in society's spheres of privilege. If good fatties exist, then not all fatties are bad, and therefore we can't ethically be excluded from society. The problem is, whenever you define something as good, you're automatically defining it in opposition to something else. So the good fatty creates the bad fatty, who then gets thrown under the bus. This blog is basically taking a look at the 12 good fatty archetypes and asking some questions about how we might use them more critically. A caveat that Stacey says that this is an intentional oversimplification, is also intentionally using stereotype in order to create archetypes. So I'm just going to quickly read the 12 archetypes. Isn't that so fucking interesting? Isn't it? So I am just so into learning more about capitalism right now and anti-work. There's a Twitter thread. What is it called? Something like no work or don't work or something like that, where people are standing up to their bosses and quitting their jobs, and they're sharing the post. It's so satisfying. You know, like they'll get a text from a boss. They get a text from a boss at 3 a.m. being like, excuse me, you were coming in tomorrow at 5 a.m. And the person is like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't. I don't know, I'm getting heart surgery tomorrow. And the boss will be like, no, I don't think so. You better come in or there'll be trouble. And then the person says, I really can't, but maybe I can come in the afternoon. And the boss says, you better. And then the person says, do you know what? Go fuck yourself. I quit. And it's so satisfying. Obviously, this is so fucked up that people are having to do this. And a lot of times it's people who are in low paid jobs who don't have that financial security, but then they're getting to a point where they're so deeply mistreated and the system of capitalism is so harmful to them that they're having to risk not being able to pay their bills and everything that comes with that. But saying all that, it's still like so exciting and dismantling capitalism is so cool. Anyway, so the 12 archetypes is the fat unicorn. So the fat unicorn is they're fat, but they engage in none of the typical behaviors assigned to fat people. So they eat healthily, they daily exercise, they have perfect lab reports. So that is the fat unicorn. So the kind of like, how is it possible that they are healthy? Oh my God, they are a unicorn. Okay, next one is the fathlete, the fat athlete, otherwise known as the exceptional fatty. So this is the the person who is strong, or who is a dancer, or who is does marathons. So that's the second one. The next one is the work in progress. And Stacey says, this is a fatty in the process of becoming not a fatty. So someone who is doing the diets, doing the stomach squeezing, the stomach amputation, whatever it is. Next one is the real woman. So this is the heroine of the Dove beauty campaigns. She is oppositional to the stick-thin fashion model, often described as supple or voluptuous, and may even have a cheeky fat roll or two. Maligned by the fashion industry that considers her, quote-unquote, fat, she is proposed as merely normal. So that would be kind of, you remember I did a podcast episode about the mid-size thing. So this would be like fat people who are basically not fat. Okay, so the fat celebrity, also known as the ambassadors of fatness. Gabourey Sidibe, Jack Black, Adele, Rebel Wilson. Okay, yeah. Sad face. Adele, Rebel Wilson. We have to scratch those out. Beth Ditto. These are the ambassadors of fatness whose extraordinary artistry or performance skills create them as an exception to the general rules of social exclusion. So they're included because they've got talent. They give us something, right? They serve a purpose. They entertain us. They make us laugh. Next one is the mama hen. The maternal fat body. So the stereotype of maternality. That's a funny word, isn't it? Maternality. I almost want to say maternity, but it's not maternity. Anyway, the stereotype for maternality places women's fat bodies outside or past the process of reproduction, or outside of the male gaze, non-sexualized and non-threatening. Yeah, so the mama hen is, I'm too old to reproduce, therefore I don't have that burden to be seen as sexually attractive because I can no longer reproduce, so I can't contribute to that capitalist expectation, and so I'm non-threatening, and I'll give you a nice hug and make you food, The next one is the big man, so the powerful man, metaphorically and physically. So this is the protector, the bear, the beast, the strong man, the clown. And sometimes is the unlikely hero. So think about Paul Blart. Remember that actor? The mall cop or whatever. And sometimes sweet and vulnerable good guy. Consider Homer Simpson. Yeah. Also, they say the big man is often associated with class. Okay, so the no-fault fatty or the hapless fatty. So this is someone who has a... They are fatties for a reason beyond their control. Irreversible fatness rooted in other conditions, example PCOS, or necessary treatment for other ailments like steroids or antidepressants. So it's not their fault that they're fat. All of this in big quotations, right? Stacey says, I know, I'm sorry, this one is morbid. So the next one is the dead early fatty. And so Stacey says, but we're talking about all kinds of good fatties and we're discussing what purposes they serve. And in service of the medical and pharmaceutical industry, to put it bluntly, there's no better fatty than a dead one. Each fat individual whose death conforms to their quote-unquote obesity doom prophecies can then be enveloped into another set of statistical warnings, offering more opportunities to justify social and financial exclusions, to fund research and product development, and to create oppressive legislation. Next, the natural fatty. She's on the right track, baby. She was born this way. The natural fatty is fat due solely to genetics. This fatty is basically the same as a fat unicorn, but is talked about a bit differently within activism. Fatness in this case constitutes a natural kind, one of a myriad possible and inevitable human forms existing along a spectrum of natural human diversity, backed by medical studies. So, someone who's just like, oh, they're just naturally fat, Next one is a fashionista, the fashionable fatty. So those within a specific size range and body shape with financial resources, sewing skills, and on-trend clothing available in their size. Okay, the rad fatty. aka the fierce fatty. Oh, look at this, the fierce fatty. The feisty fatty, the uppity fatty. The rad fatty is the ultimate rejecter of stigma, appropriating stigmatizing terms and turning them on their head, refusing conformance on every level. So I'm going to read all of this because this is really interesting. So, refusing conformance on every level and often engaging in performative displays of behaviours that are discouraged in or considered stereotypical of fat people, but with intention and a tone of rebellion. The rad fatty has a strong fat politic, has likely been involved in activism. Some have attended higher education institutions and have an academic understanding of sizeism, while others have undergone a process of self and or community education to gain their knowledge and insight. The rad in the rad fatty means radical, as well as just rad, e.g. awesome, cool, fierce, etc., and speaks to a commitment to undoing oppression, not only in their own lives but in the society. There is a high value placed on political knowledge, appropriate language, and that fierceness that comes along with an active rejection of stigma and having learned to love and appreciate the self. Okay, so for each one of these, there's like questions to ask, so kind of we can go in deeper. And the conclusion here that Stacey makes is the good fatty is a complex subject, and each seeks legitimacy in its own way and from its own target audience. But where we create one inclusion, we often create or reinforce other exclusions. It's important to be aware of where and how we seek social capital and who we leave behind when we do. That said, I'll take a moment to reinforce what I said at the beginning. There is nothing wrong with falling into, or even many of these archetypes. Sometimes I use fashion to make myself feel safer as I walk through the world. Sometimes I get overwhelmed and fall back into old dieting behaviors. Sometimes I strive to embody that fierceness I admire so much in other rad fatties. Again, where the good fatty becomes problematic is when it's used as a justification for social legitimacy. When it says, I deserve to be seen as valuable because, insert good fatty qualifier here. We all deserve to be seen as valuable wherever we're at in our individual journeys with our bodies, our self-esteem, or our politics. Leave no fatty behind. Yeah, so one of the points that I made in the good fatty is can be looked down upon by others for still investing in diet culture and fat phobia. So that's one thing that we want to try and avoid, especially like with that last one, that kind of the rad fatty, is a lot of people listening to the podcast, if you've listened to more than, 20 episodes, you're probably pretty well versed in a lot of fat topics and are probably not dieting or unlearning dieting, unlearning fat phobia. And to look at other people who are not there yet and think, oh, they're stupid. How can they believe that? I can't believe it. They're perpetuating harm. And yes, they're perpetuating harm. And they were us just recently. And they deserve love and acceptance and equal access and everything, right? Leave no fatty behind. And so, it's like that episode I did a little while ago about, what's her face? Rebel Wilson. And being mad about Rebel Wilson, which isn't totally legitimate. And being frustrated that Rebel has been caught up in being a good fatty. Really, that's what it is Rebel is trying to be seen as a good fatty. Now, where it becomes problematic is exactly what Stacey Bias is saying, is that when you're pitting one against the other. And so the thing with Rebel Wilson, which gets on people's tits, is if Rebel Wilson wants to be a good fatty, go ahead. And I think a lot of people are frustrated that the throwing under the bus thing. Rebel Wilson using that social legitimacy, saying, you can do it too. It's not too late for you to become healthy. Throwing the, quote, bad fatties under the bus. And as well, we don't want to do the opposite. We don't want to be throwing, quote unquote, good fatties under the bus either. But again, recognizing the good fatties, quote unquote, it's all stereotypes, or, here's everything as a good fatty. The good fatties are the ones who are positioning themselves as closer to power. Which again is about safety and surviving in society. And so, we have to consider all sides of it. So, it's a really nuanced conversation, lots of different sides. But again, please don't feel bad if you engage in any behaviours. But if you do realize that you might be engaging in behaviours that aren't helpful. For example, I see a lot of people say, I'm fat, but I'm healthy. Oh, Dave over there, he's fat, but, he works out. And so it's saying, oh, but you're one of the acceptable ones. You don't have to say that to be legitimate, You don't have to. It doesn't matter if someone is fat and unhealthy. It doesn't matter if someone has a reason for being fat. It doesn't matter, all of the things that we're talking about. That is not a condition for love and respect and all of those things. It shouldn't be. Often it is. But then if you are buying into that by repeating these unhelpful archetypes, stereotypes, tropes, we want to avoid doing that, right? We want to avoid saying, oh, it's okay because I'm healthy. Oh, it's okay because they're healthy. But it's okay because they're trying to lose weight. Oh, but it's okay because, but. That's where it can get problematic. I want to share with you a post from Everyday Feminism, written by Marie Souther-Despina. And the post is 9 ways to defy the good fatty trope. So if you do want to do some defying, if you do want to do, some fucking up the norms and the rules and all that type of stuff, then here are 9 ways. I'm just going to read out the headlines, and if you want to continue reading, you can. Wear something that magazines once told you was reserved for others. 2, don't feel pressured to turn yourself into an hourglass. 3, ask yourself why you want to post that workout selfie or kale salad snap. 4, don't edit your cellulite, stretch marks, or double chin out of your photos. 5, in fact, share full-figured snaps on social media. Yes, including dating profiles. 6, reiterate that you can be fat and beautiful at the same time. 7, point out and be critical of fat shaming in real life or in media. 8, remind yourself that you don't need excuses. 9, be loud. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. I think that number 8 one, remind yourself that you don't need excuses. And remind yourself that if you do feel like you need to give people excuses, then it makes sense. It makes sense. If that's a way to keep yourself safe, then that's a way to keep yourself safe, right? But there are some ideas for if you do want to defy the good fatty trope. So no matter how or what way you're choosing to try and survive in this fat phobic world is fine, is a-okay. Know that you don't have to do certain things if you don't want to do. If you don't want to, like if you but engaging in certain behaviours to be seen as a good fatty, but actually you hate it. Or opposite, engaging in certain behaviours to be a bad fatty, but you're not into it. You don't have to do anything, right? Do what feels good to you. Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Your questions? Wish you could tell me what you... I wish you could tell me what your questions were so I could answer them for you. What are your questions? I guess you can just send in a hello. If you do have questions about this or about anything, then there is if you go to the show notes, there's a link for you to submit a question. And I could answer it on the podcast for you. So do that. All right, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for hanging out with me today. Oh, my voice survived. Stay fierce, fatty, and I will see you in a while, alligator. Goodbye. Goodbye. Thanks for listening to the episode. And if you feel ready to get serious about this work and want to know when the doors open to Fierce Fatty Academy, which is my signature program where I teach all about how to overcome your fat phobic beliefs and learn to love your fat body, then go to fiercefatty.com/waitlist. Again, that is fiercefatty.com/waitlist to get your name on the waitlist for when Fierce Fatty Academy, my signature program, opens.